Hate number 5, liquidity. The authors of so many reviews warn their readers, buying a VW Passat CC is easy, but selling it later is not at all easy. And after all, everything seems to be fine. Literally everyone without exception likes the appearance, and the brand is worthy, and the car is the most German, and it drives perfectly, but come on. There is a complete illiquid market on the market, unless, of course, the price dropped to a minimum. Somehow I put it on sale for the sake of interest, not a single call in 2 months. The owners are discussing the reasons for this phenomenon quite actively, but they could not come to a single conclusion. Some believe that the whole point is in the turbo engines of the TSI family, which are quite easy to chip. This, of course, is a huge temptation without a fight to get into big bullies, in the sense that it is relatively inexpensive to get a fast car. However, a serious increase in power and torque inevitably affects the transmission resource. Moreover, a serious forcing requires changes in the brake system, intercooler, exhaust, turbine, suspension tuning, in the end. So people write that it makes no sense to buy such cars on the secondary market and that it will be an obvious hit for money. Someone thinks that it's all about the crisis and that people simply don't have money. Someone sees the root of evil in the initial unreliability of the DSG-7 box. One way or another, it's still necessary to take into account not the highest liquidity of the Passat CC. On the other hand, what makes life difficult for the seller inevitably improves the position of the buyer. Love number 5, design. Volkswagen Passat CC, also known as Volkswagen CC, popularly known as Fly, is one of the cars whose appearance is liked by absolutely everyone. As a matter of fact, even critics and haters of the model, and there are some, for a long time list real or imaginary shortcomings in their reviews. They say that the engine is frankly weak, and the DSG-7 box is a brand image killer, but they must admit that the car looks very ugly and handsome. And those who like the car are not at all embarrassed by enthusiastic epithets, the best appearance in its class. Not for a single day did I lose the feeling that I liked him. The owners like that the model still attracts attention today, and it looks quite modern. Despite the year, the car looks very modern. It does not get lost in the stream, it attracts attention, the appearance is very pleasant, in the regions they don't turn around directly. Frameless windows real style. In fact, such statements can be found in almost every second review. You constantly come across stories about how a person went to a car dealership to buy a completely different car, but saw a Passat CC, literally fell in love at first sight and bought it. In general, as the author of one of the reviews wrote, SS cannot be chosen by reason, you have to fall in love with it and buy it only for its shape. In any case, during the restyling, Oliver Stefani, who worked directly under the leadership of Walter da Silva, corrected all the mistakes of the Gunikov era. Swollen eyes, headlights and a powerful grille shield are a thing of the past. In full accordance with the corporate style, the headlights acquired slightly angular outlines, the radiator lining stretched out, and the car got the maximum resemblance to the flagship, and not very well known among us, Volkswagen Phaeton, and with the version after the second facelift. Hate number 4, weak paintwork and noise insulation. It must be said that on the issue of the quality of both the paintwork and the sound insulation, the opinions of the owners differ in the most radical way. For example, in some reviews, the authors write, the paintwork is in perfect order, the paint layer is very thick, at least 140 to 170 microns, and even years later the car is like new, no signs of incipient corrosion or swollen paint. True, they specify that since 2012 the bodywork has had practically no problems with corrosion only if you take good care of the car. I followed it more than well, constantly washing, every year coatings, liquid glass, ceramics, hydrophobes, etc. similar. And others complain, and in a very harsh form. Here, for example, is what the owner writes about his car, which has never been in a single accident. The paint began to swell on the moldings of the rear doors and on the bottom of the rear doors from the inside. Upon closer examination, I found swelling of the paint around the lock loops in the rear door openings, and at the lights on the trunk lid. When I decided to clean these places and tore off the moldings, I just went nuts. The through holes were rotten there. And he is not alone in his suffering. But it must be admitted that there are still fewer complaints about the quality of the metal. Chippings constantly appear on the paintwork after the track, but even if you do not tint, rust does not appear. Owners also differ in their assessments of sound insulation. Some believe that the noise isolation is excellent, that it is at a high level, and that everything is just super, the car is quiet. But others complain, "It seemed quite noisy to me, noise isolation is not so hot." Although this is fixable, the arches are noisy, and it immediately becomes noticeably quieter in the car. But the owners consider frameless side windows to be the main source of aerodynamic noise at high speed. Love number 4, materials and cabin comfort. On this issue, the opinions of the owners also differ quite significantly. Some believe that the interior of the SS is very SOSO, the interior is ancient, plastic, except for the very top, is like in Polo, Salon, that is, its simplicity even repelled a little when buying. But, in fairness, there are very few such statements. The owners do not discuss ergonomics at all, they simply take it for granted. They say, "Everything is convenient, but how could it be otherwise?" Unless they note that the seats are very comfortable and the back does not hurt after them, and the legs do not numb. And the space in the cabin seems quite sufficient for them. 5 people feel quite comfortable, except for tall passengers on the second row, whose heads are pressed by a low ceiling. Some, however, believe that the interior space is still not enough, but they will always find someone to object to, who says that the salon is small. I don't know about you, but we drive as a family in a car, and everything is okay. The eldest child, 7 years old, does not reach the back with his feet, and okay, only children sit in the back. The only complaint concerns access to the driver's seat, but it is expressed only by very corpulent drivers, in addition, weighed down by medical problems with their backs and lower backs. But for such sufferers, there is such an option as a built-in massager. A massage driver's seat is very convenient for fatigue or back pain. Soft, non-distracting massage allows you to drive for a long time. But in a huge number of reviews, one can find praise for both the interior as a whole and the finishing materials used. Very high-quality interior trim made of quality materials, salon with nice skin and good quality. But most of all, the owners are pleased with the high wear resistance of both leather and other finishing materials. The interior after 115,000 kilometers looks like new, good quality leather. I think it will continue to be in proper form. The quality of the finishes is top-notch, everything is wear-resistant. Again, with regular care, there was not a single scuff on my rag seats. The interior for 10 years is like new. Hate number 3, winter problems, traffic, windows, sunroof. As for cross-country ability, as a rule, their authors do not write anything about it directly in the reviews. In the worst case, they will write something like, "This is not a Jeep, you can't drive through meter-long snow," or "The clearance is low, I'm afraid of curbs like fire." But in the list of shortcomings, 8 out of 10 authors will certainly indicate this very cross-country ability. It is clear that they do not mean the ability to overcome swamps, drive along logging ruts or storm freshly plowed fields. We are talking about purely urban cross-country ability, the ability to climb the curb, leave the parking lot covered with snow. It is no coincidence that many limit the period of operation to warm seasons. But in winter, some design features of the car also make themselves felt. First of all, frameless windows that freeze to seals and do not allow doors to be open. Damn rubber bands freeze to windows in winter. A coupe is like that. There are several ways to deal with this scourge. The easiest is to keep a plastic credit card handy, the corner of which needs to be held between the glass and the rubber band. The second way is to set an alarm with auto start. Before leaving, I warmed up the car, and everything quickly returns to normal. Some owners believe that it is very useful to lubricate the rubber seals with silicone, but there are those who actively disapprove of this method. We don't smear any crap like lubrication on the seals. If you smear them, they will collect even more dirt. In any case, Volkswagen CC owners have to leave the house early in winter to either do the credit card exercise or warm up the remotely started car. But freezing glass winter troubles are not limited. There are complaints about the ill-conceived electric drive for opening the gas tank hatch. In the cold, especially after washing, it must be thoroughly blown or let the car stand warm. There were cases, and not only me, when, after a severe frost, the hatch did not open after pressing the button. At the same time, the mechanism works, the thrust flies from the drive to the hatch, and as a result, the trunk lining is disassembled and the thrust is adjusted at best, or the electric drive is replaced at worst. On some specimens, the skin materials begin to desperately creak in winter. It creaks, and not just creaks, but worse than our basins, and do not believe anyone who claims otherwise. In winter, it's generally a disaster in an unheated cabin, so you need to make noise and glue with anti-creak. Well, the racks in severe frost begin to tap, but then they warm up on the go, and everything returns to normal. Love number 3, trunk. Well, among the advantages of the model, many reviewers write down a voluminous trunk. Indeed, 540 liters is not at all small, but it is also important that outwardly the trunk does not look so huge, and the model itself has a reputation of not a family car, but a car for the soul. Maybe that's why the authors of so many reviews talk about the trunk in some detail. The trunk turned out to be a surprise. That's what I didn't expect. The stroller, for babies, fits without removing the wheels, and you can put 3 more bags of groceries. Plus mesh, hooks, etc. They give nice bonuses. Well, the expressions just huge, really huge and surprisingly huge related to the size of the trunk can be found in a good half of the reviews. Hate number 2, maintenance cost. There is no consensus in the owner community on this issue. Let's start with the fact that a lot of people express dissatisfaction with the officially declared power of 152 horsepower. Well, the truth is, there would be exactly 150 horses, the tax rate would be 35 rubles per horsepower, and 2 horses, absolutely imperceptible in real life, increase this rate. And then it would be better to have a motor initially boosted to 170 horsepower. The annual tax in Moscow would be 7,650, instead of 6,840 rubles a year, but with a noticeable increase in dynamics, this would not be so offensive. To a certain extent, these grievances are compensated not by the highest hull insurance rate. Camry didn't even test a new one, as soon as I found out how much hull costs. It turned out something about 120,000 rubles. For comparison, on the SS at approximately the same cost 2 times less, 62,000 with Copex. As for the maintenance itself, the owners estimate its cost very differently. Someone thinks that they are satisfied with everything, and most importantly, both the service and consumables are significantly cheaper compared to Mercs and Audi, and the driving pleasure is almost the same. In general, if you want to ride dynamically, be prepared to pay for it. Others note that maintenance is not very cheap, but once every 15,000 kilometers this is not critical. But there is one ambush here. All talk about the reliability of the SS inevitably ends with a recommendation to reduce the service interval to 6 to 7,000, and only in this case can you count on a long and happy life of the car. Again, in its style and spirit, the Volkswagen CC is a youth car, and even wealthy young people cannot boast of a bottomless wallet so often. As a result, the owners note in the reviews, for those who change from cars like the Volkswagen Polo or Solaris, the cost of maintaining the SS may seem significantly higher, and the car much more tender. Love number 2, economy. But in assessing the economy of the Volkswagen CC, there are no particular differences. At least the order of the numbers given by the owners is practically the same. According to them, in the summer in the city, consumption rarely exceeds 10 L/100 kilometers, and more often fluctuates around the figure 8. Consumption in the city is 7 to 8 liters. Gasoline consumption in the city does not exceed 8 liters, which is very pleasing. On the highway, the picture does turn out completely pure chocolate. Gasoline consumption along the highway at a speed of 90 to 100 km/h 5.9 L/100 km, 110 to 120 km/h 6.5-7. When driving on the highway on cruise control at cruising speed, the average consumption does not exceed 6.5 liters per 100 km, route 5 to 7.5 liters, depending on the speed limit. It is clear that in winter, with the inevitable long warm-ups, the consumption increases significantly and can reach up to 13 liters per 100 kilometers, but, In essence, this is not so scary. All the above figures refer to versions with a 152 horsepower 1.8 TSI engine. The owners of 210 horsepower cars with 2-liter petrol turbo engines are also satisfied. It drives very economically, 6.5 L/100 km highway, 10.2 L/100 km city. And it is clear that the few owners of diesel cars are even less worried about consumption. Fuel consumption in the combined cycle with active driving is about 6.3 liters of diesel fuel per 100. Hate number 1, reliability, timing chain, electrical, DSG. The main claims of Volkswagen Passat CC owners are related to the reliability of this model. You can't praise for reliability. Volkswagen commercially thought out every detail, so no matter how much the car is repaired, it's still 70,000, and again some kind of repair, one of the owners complains. All these cars are for 2 years. It is not for nothing that the guarantee for them is 2 years without a mileage limit. Here, for 2 years, you can take it, squeeze everything out of it, and then let the next owner help car services and spare parts manufacturers grow rich. Accordingly, when buying a CC on the secondary market, the risk of running into such a shabby copy is quite large. Here is the owner who made such an unsuccessful purchase. In 2 years and 70,000 kilometers of run, total 130,000 kilometers, I changed the turbine, installed a contract gearbox, repaired the cylinder head, replaced the front levers, struts in a circle, stabilizer struts, front calipers, brake discs, steering rack, front left and rear right power windows, climate control unit, front speaker, and all this not counting scheduled maintenance. They are waiting in line, replacing the piston group, polishing or replacing head optics, repairing the hand brake, replacing the level sensor fuel, replacement of a buggy parking sensors, non-working heating of the driver's seat, check the fuse. It is not surprising that the authors of the reviews advise to inspect the car especially carefully when buying. Cars made in 2012 should be checked especially seriously. The fact is that pre-styling cars had a lot of rather critical shortcomings. They were very characteristic of an oil burner, the problem of which decarbonization could not solve. Only a major overhaul helped, and a timing chain jump, in connection with which it was recommended to replace the chain together with the tensioner at a run of 90,000 kilometers, and to revise the condition of the tensioner at each maintenance. Formally, cars produced in 2012 are already restyled cars with a new body, but during the year, they continued to install components and assemblies from the old backlog. And only since 2013, all Volkswagen CCs received engines, in which they installed new pistons with additional drain holes, new oil catchers. All this essentially solved the oil burner problem, as well as a new type chain tensioner, which has a different geometric shape, more teeth on the tensioner itself and protection against chain jumping in the upper part of the cover. In any case, in very many reviews there is a recommendation to reduce the service interval from the 15,000 kilometers prescribed by the regulations to 5 to 7,000 they say. Only this can be the key to a more or less stable preservation of German gasoline turbo engines for quite a long time. Another group of problems is related to the operation of the DSG-7 box. These problems were not resolved even after 2013. And here, many owners consider regular replacement of clutches an adequate price for efficiency and good dynamics. On average, during dynamic driving, the clutch wears out after 30 to 40,000 kilometers. Officials change it without problems, consider it a consumable. Mechatronic goes 80 to 120,000 kilometers. I think this is an absolutely normal indicator. But here it is worth considering that lovers of chipping can run into the early death of both the DSG-7 clutch and mechatronics. Guys, don't chip 1.8, everything is killed, and very quickly. I was lucky it wasn't a mechatronic. With a motor chip with DSG-7, be prepared that the life of the box is reduced in direct proportion. DSG-6 flew into my car after the epic death of the DSG-7. And the thing is that with chip tuning, the peak torque of the engine increases to 300 to 330 Nm, and the DSG-7 is able to digest no more than 250 Nm without any problems. At the same time, if replacing a clutch used to cost about $15,000 to $25,000 and could be regarded as a fairly budgetary event, then one can only guess what such a repair will cost today, and it's even scary to even think about mechatronics. In any case, the owner of a car with DSG-7, even without chip tuning, should follow a number of rules. Just don't drive the car, turn on sport mode in traffic jams, or switch to manual control so that the transmission doesn't constantly jump from first gear to second gear and back. Don't skid. If you get stuck, it's better to wait for help, and also avoid towing. But if you are still afraid, then look for a car with mechanics or a 2-liter engine and a DSG-6. However, mechanics cannot completely protect you from troubles. Here, for example, is the following story: mileage about 75,000 kilometers, manual transmission. The flywheel collapsed, which also entailed the need to replace the clutch kit. I repeat, at 75,000 kilometers. With all this, I am quite a calm and careful driver, all MOT passed in a timely manner and exclusively at the dealer service. And this is not a Polo, but quite a decent, it would seem, middle-class car. Another group of problems is related to the electrics, primarily with the failure of the wiring harness in the trunk, the so-called braids. Due to the peculiarities of the trunk lid opening geometry, the wiring harness running under the skin may fray. This can manifest itself in unstable operation of the rear lighting equipment, and in the fact that the image from the rear view camera begins to disappear. As a rule, problems begin after a mileage of about 100,000 kilometers. Most often, you have to solve the problem by replacing the entire harness, and one of the craftsmen does it on their own, reinforcing it with additional insulation and increasing the length of the harness. They say it helps. As for the reliability of the suspension, it also does not cause much enthusiasm. Someone thinks that a complete suspension bulkhead at 90,000 is absolutely normal. And someone believes that the suspension is the main disadvantage of the Volkswagen CC, because it gets out with its flowability. I bought it, drove 1,500 kilometers in the replacement of the front stabilizer struts. Then the suspension went another 40,000 and almost all died, before the replacement of silent blocks, front and rear with reinforced ones, racks, opporniki, rear struts and stabilizer struts. The quality of spare parts is a separate issue, so the suspension continues to fray the nerves. And in general, according to the owners, the root of the problem is that the suspension is designed for smooth European roads. On good asphalt, she walks for a very long time, but with us, alas. Love number 1, dynamics and handling on the track. We have already discussed the design, interior quality, spacious trunk and efficiency, but still the main advantages of the Volkswagen CC lie in the plane of the pleasure that driving this car gives the owner. There are only positive emotions from the car: appearance, dynamics, how it holds the road on its negative wheel alignment of the rear wheels, how it presses to the ground at speeds of more than 100 km per hour due to the aerodynamic features of the body, side wind. What is that? Is that? Gear shifting and turbine pickup are stable, the engine constantly pulls at any speed, and accelerates from speed very soulfully. And in this complex it is difficult to separate quite decent, even without any chipping, dynamics from the reference handling. Drivability, it is the ride itself plus handling that are ideal, well, or close to ideal, in my purely personal opinion. Although there are, of course, those who are categorically not satisfied with the dynamics without chip tuning. Before the chip tuning, she drove like a dull junk. The sport mode at low speeds turned into a roar of the engine and a rise in speed, combined with a disgusting acceleration result. But there are still not so many such snobs from speed. True, controllability is achieved at the cost of a fair amount of suspension stiffness. The car is quite stiff, it feels very strong on small pits, but at the same time you feel very confident on it at high speed on the highway. The car is really better considered as primarily a track car. Here it feels completely at home. The owners note this and actively use it. The track is the element of this car. 120 on a cruise, soft, comfortable, and you can take any track with ease. I traveled all over the Caucasus and half of Europe. You go and enjoy yourself, no stress, no fatigue. The only thing that slightly upsets owners is the thick and strongly inclined A-pillars, which limit visibility. But this cannot significantly reduce the emotions that the Volkswagen Passat CC gives. The M11 highway or the Moscow Ring Road, the traffic density is low, a hard day of work is behind us. You step on the gas and feel the adrenaline awakening in you, even though the CC is not a sports car.